Hello. This is a course that we will be conducting on AMPscript, focused at an introductory level. It's a starting point to help you become familiar with this programming language and begin making customizations. As we progress, you'll be able to delve into more complex tasks. Typically, the biggest challenge is to get started, and that's the main mission of this course. AMPscript is a server-side scripting language. It's proprietary and exclusively used within Salesforce Marketing Cloud. This language allows for content customization and conditional logic, which we'll explore further in this course. It also grants access to data stored in data extensions. This language enables customization for both emails and landing pages, which you probably already know as Cloud Pages in the Marketing Cloud platform. It also applies to SMS and push messages. The uses are limitless, but to categorize the most common ones, it's used to generate dynamic content, manipulate data stored in data extensions, and primarily retrieve it for personalizations. There's an advanced usage through SOAP and APIs as well. You can also create dynamic cloud pages, capture form data on cloud pages and data extensions, or personalize these data extensions based on users who've received the email and clicked on specific links. There are many more functionalities beyond this, including tracking and analytics, subject line personalization, and we'll examine a specific example of this case. Furthermore, you can dive into immensely advanced tasks, like utilizing various related high-voltage functions to personalize emails. There are numerous other applications we'll explore if you're already familiar with the platform. Many times, you might wonder why AMPscript is necessary. It's true that Marketing Cloud offers certain visual solutions that allow for a certain level of content dynamism. However, in many cases, these fall short, and a lot of criteria are needed to personalize content. Often, these criteria end up not being functional. But, to summarize and to understand all the different possibilities Marketing Cloud has, we know it has dynamic content that varies based on variables included in the delivery. This constitutes the most basic usage, which is personalization strings that personalize either attributes of the recipient or information included within the data extension itself. Then, there's what we're going to explore in this course, which is AMPscript. It's what provides the greatest flexibility and power for personalization and various other operations. It's one of the most prominent aspects of Marketing Cloud compared to many other marketing automation tools. And now, let's start delving into the details of this language, AMPscript, and how you can make the most of it. First, we're going to cover some fundamental concepts that are crucial across all programming languages. These are essentially features that languages possess and sometimes differentiate from others that are more restrictive. For instance, AMPscript is case-insensitive. This means that it doesn't matter how you write variables or conditionals, it treats them the same way. For instance, if you write 1 in lowercase and later reference it in uppercase, it will still recognize it. AMPscript doesn't differentiate between them, it treats them as equal. Some other languages differ with just a single letter variation. If V is uppercase and then lowercase, they are considered distinct, even if the letters are the same. But in this case, they are not. Next, comments. Comments are typically added to include multiple lines of explanation. Comments are crucial in programming. It's always recommended to add comments because, over time, it's easy to forget the specifics of your own code. Months later, when you reopen a piece of code, you might need to study it again. Using comments helps you understand the purpose of each code section you've programmed. In this case, as you can see, comments are enclosed between / and */. Everything in between is a comment. Then there's the delimitation of a text string. This is also quite important. When declaring a variable, as in this example, you need to specify how the text string should be formatted. Here, you can see that it can be enclosed in either double or single quotes. One thing to be cautious of, especially when copying code from the internet, though we'll address this in some final error prevention tips, is that different types of quotation marks might look similar, but have different orientations. Using the incorrect ones could lead to programming errors. Now, let's discuss how execution works in Marketing Cloud. This is crucial as there's a sequence. If you declare a variable later and want to use it at the beginning, it won't be recognized. It follows a sequential order. As depicted in this slide, first, the pre-header is executed, then the body of the message, both the HTML and text parts, followed by the subject. With this, the basics are now explained. Next, we have the aspect of delimiters, which essentially inform Marketing Cloud that it's an AMPscript code. We have 3 ways to do this. Well, the third one isn't programming exactly, but it requires a variable and could fit within this scope. The first, as we've seen, is code blocks. To mark off a code block, within which there can be multiple lines of programming, you enclose it with percentage signs and brackets. You input all the programming you want, and then close it with a closing bracket and percentage signs. Within these markers, which indicate programming, you can input as much programming as you want. Marketing Cloud will execute it, and if there's a programming error, an error will be thrown because it tries to process it. Then, there are inline methods. These are used when you want to print something throughout the HTML. For instance, here are 2 examples, one where you print a specific variable, and the other where you print a date. You use these percentage signs to define what you want to print. Marketing Cloud understands that something needs to be printed within the HTML. Next, there are personalization strings. These are primarily used when you're sending emails. This is oriented towards sending emails. In a data extension, there are specific fields, and these fields may have personalized attributes you want to print. For instance, first name, because it's a part of the data extension. You'd input first name exactly as it's written in the data extension, enclosing it between double percentage signs on either side. Marketing Cloud replaces this with the actual value. You can see the usage of these 3 options below. The first is a variable declaration, that's string. Then, there's formatting, and within a code block, as we've explained. Lastly, there's high first name, which is a field within the data extension. We'd then print a variable. When printing a variable, you use this v function, which we'll explain in more detail later. So, you have these 3 classic options of AMPscript delimiters that let Marketing Cloud identify and know it needs to execute something. Diving a bit deeper into what we've mentioned about personalization strings, this allows for the inclusion of subscriber attributes. These are identified within the information that Marketing Cloud has stored about the subscriber, or fields from the sendable data extension we are using, as we've mentioned earlier in the previous slide. Here are some examples. Email address, which is a subscriber attribute and represents the email of that subscriber. Then, there's a field, for instance, a topic like inbound marketing. This would be a field from a data extension, as indicated in the slide. Next, we have variables or system data. When you're sending out an email and you've included a name in the email, that's a data point that's already within the system. Even when you retrieve it later through a function, such as Cloud Page URL, and you land on that page, you can also recover these attributes. Examples include main name, and then there's a field x-long date, which essentially retrieves the current date from the system and displays it in a long format. There are different formats. There's documentation for all the personalization strings Salesforce provides, and it's very useful to know them. They provide a lot of information that can be injected into the data extension and used for various types of recordings. Additionally, as we've discussed, This applies to landing pages, etc. Regarding the inline delimiter topic, well, it's essentially as we've discussed. The format is %, equals sign, and closes with equals sign, %. In between, what's printed is, for example, a variable. You could print, for example, with a format. In this case, first with the first letter capitalized of the name you're printing. Or perhaps a system variable, such as a date, anything really. In this case, there's also a very interesting function that's worth delving into, and we might even make a separate video about it. It's a link to a cloud page you've created. By simply including this link in an email, the user who clicks on it arrives at the page with all the variables present at the moment it was sent. In other words, all the subscriber's attributes, all the system data from that particular sending moment, name, BM name, and the date extension that was used to send it, tons of different variables, as we've discussed, even data extension variables, and so on. You can even add additional variables to the URL. Therefore, it's highly useful and widely employed. We won't dwell on this much further, you'll see it in examples. Essentially, this is used when there are multiple lines of code. When you're programming in AMPscript, you use these delimiters, and within them goes all the code, conditionals, logic, calls to action, updates, and so forth. Finally, for this first part of the course, we're going to explore a fundamental topic present in all programming languages, variables. In the case of AMPscript variables, they possess a peculiarity that sets them apart from other languages. They must all be declared with an initial @ symbol. As we've mentioned earlier, the case, whether uppercase or lowercase, doesn't matter when calling them or assigning values. However, as a good practice, we attempt to use a combination of uppercase and lowercase for readability, as you can see in the variable declaration. For instance, first name is separated for clear readability. We sometimes use underscores as well, although this is less common. This kind of formatting assists in quickly identifying elements when revisiting the code, as codes can be dense and filled with continuous text. While not obligatory, declaring variables in this manner is a recommended best practice. Here, we declare variables first with var, which is how variables are declared, and then separated by commas, all the ones we're going to use in this snippet of code. After declaring them, values need to be assigned. First is first name, which is enclosed in brackets for the value assignment. This value comes from a data extension, and in this case, the field was written with a space. Such formatting is not advisable. Fields are usually combined or separated with underscores, just like variables. However, if a field contains a space, it needs to be enclosed in brackets, otherwise, a programming error will occur. Remember this, it's crucial. Otherwise, it could lead to confusion when facing mysterious errors. Gender is another variable. It's a single word, so it doesn't require brackets. Although including them wouldn't cause any issues, it's not necessary to overcomplicate things. Following that, there's a conditional structure. We'll explore this later, but let's touch on it briefly here. If gender is indicated as male, a certain treatment is applied. If it's Gmail, another treatment is applied. And if it's not identified, another common occurrence in many databases, then a generic treatment is assigned. This situation arises because people sometimes fail to provide the required treatment while filling out customer contact information. A solution is necessary to ensure these cases are not left blank. In these instances, a versatile treatment is applied. Next, we declare the complete name variable, which combines all these fields. We essentially use concat, a function that, as the name suggests, concatenates text. We input the treatments, add a space to prevent text from merging, then include the first name, followed by the last name. Subsequently, we print this concatenated string. We've talked about personalization, but why emphasize it so much? There's a close relationship between marketing and programming in this regard. The more personalized our communications and timely our interactions with contacts, the more effective our marketing efforts become. In other words, the time invested in personalization yields superior results. That's why the aspect of personalization is immensely important. AMPscript is the most potent tool for personalization. Not all automation tools feature a language as comprehensive as Salesforce Marketing Cloud's. This course exists to enable you to make the most of this capability and craft truly well-personalized communications. Here we can see the common errors that can occur in code, not just in AMPscript, but in any other language as well. Many of these mistakes are universal. The first one mentioned is failing to properly close parentheses. This is a typical issue, for example, when two functions are concatenated together, sometimes even more. Parentheses are opened, but one is forgotten to be closed. Very common. Another frequent occurrence is the use of copy-pasted code found online. There are quotes that aren't valid in programming, leading to unexpected errors. Always use standard double or single quotes. Syntax errors, including incorrect placement of conditionals, are also common. For instance, if we present a scenario where the end if of a conditional if isn't closed. Similar to not closing parentheses, it's common to forget the closing parts of conditionals, or the end for the beginning of a statement. These are some examples of errors that can arise. Additionally, we've included some common mistakes that are relevant, especially not so much for beginners, but for those who are actively programming. When programming, it's typical for people to directly use a formula for simple arithmetic operations, like 5 plus 10 for addition, and to use functions for more complex tasks, like subtraction, multiplication, and division. These are just a few notes for beginners about typical errors. Being aware of these errors can save us valuable time when they occur. Now, to illustrate everything explained with an example, let's navigate to a testing environment within Marketing Cloud. We've set up a test data extension containing the necessary data for practicing a personalization exercise with a template. This data extension includes the required fields like first name, last name, email, and gender, along with some test records. Next, we'll move to a test template, where we'll input the AMPscript for this personalization. The first step is to click on, for instance, a text or HTML module. Once we access the HTML editor within the module, we input the opening and closing tags that indicate where the AMPscript code will be placed. Now, we declare the variables that we will later use: first name, last name, gender, treatment. Remember to add at the beginning of each variable. We assign values to these variables. All the values come from the data extension, but we can also use values from the default personalization strings in the Salesforce Marketing Cloud send. Now comes the conditional if part. If the condition is true, and gender is equal to female, it will assign this treatment. In the case of male, where the else if is, it will be assigned the Mr. treatment. If it's not defined, where the else is, a neutral formula like Mr. or Mrs. will be used. Now, all that's left is to bring everything together. For this purpose, we use the concat function to combine all the parts and generate the treatment we've defined through the if conditional. And now, the only thing left is to include the variable treatment in the HTML using the v function to print it. Now, we click on Preview and Test, and we can see all the names and treatments correctly printed, such as Mrs. Emily Johnson, Mr. John Smith, Mr. Michael Davies, and Mrs. Olivia Anderson. As you can see, all the treatments and names are printed correctly using the conditional logic that we implemented. By the way, we'd like to mention that we have a comprehensive AMPscript manual for marketing available, and it's completely free. We invite you to download it from the URL mentioned here. This manual serves as a valuable companion to all these videos. And finally, thank you very much for engaging with our content. We appreciate your interest. Until the next video.